All right. So thank you for joining us today. My name is Jenny Kashwani.
And my name is Molly Brandt.
So we're both at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. We've been working on this project for the last couple years now and wanted to share some of the outcomes that we've had related to an assessment tool for use with the National Ag Literacy Outcomes. So again, Jenny and Molly. So we'll be sharing with you a little bit today. So why is this important? And Molly's giving me a hard time before we got on this afternoon because I always show this slide and it's my favorite slide, but really just to iterate again the importance of teaching our youth today about science and technology and engineering, and especially in relationship to agriculture. So this slide is from the American Society of Agricultural and Biological Engineers. It really just talks about the need for solutions for life on a small planet, right? When you think about our increasing population and how our resources are not growing, they're going to be staying the same. And as we discover new ways to use them, though, we can provide more materials for growing populations. So that includes more water, more energy, more medical technologies, all those things that a larger population is going to require. And of course, when we think about agriculture, this is especially important. As we've continued to progress, agriculture becomes more and more dependent on science and technology and engineering and math. I mean, you can think about this as always part of agriculture has been science and technology and these different tools, but especially now when we think about variable rate irrigation and we think about drones and robotic machinery and all of these cool innovations that are coming, and they're really going to be important as we move towards the 9 billion people and larger populations even than that we're going to need to have these technologies to feed everyone, to provide energy and water for everyone. And so that's why Molly and I both feel it's very important, and a lot of our work here at Nebraska has been about preparing this next generation to meet these challenges and to understand the science and technology and engineering and everything that goes into that. So as you may have heard before, we have the Science Literacy Framework here in the Institute of Ag and Natural Resources. Specifically today, we're going to be focusing on the PK-12 education part of that, but as you can see, our work in science literacy really spans PK-12 through higher education, through the public and our partners in commodity boards and different educational entities. And so specifically today, though, we're going to be focusing on the elementary school level.
So the focus of my graduate research project was the National Agricultural Literacy Outcomes, or the NALOs. And these NALOs are organized in a variety of topic areas such as agriculture and the environment, plants and animals for food, fiber, and energy, and also the STEM dimensions of agriculture. These NALOs are also organized by grade level benchmarks going from early elementary, so students in the K through 2 grade bands, and then all the way up to high school kids in grades 9 through 12. And for the purpose of my research project, there were tons of NALOs out there in all of these topic areas and then all of these grade bands. So we decided to focus on the grade band or the topic areas of agriculture and the environment, and science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We felt like these were the most appropriate ones, just kind of talking about how we're talking about precision agriculture and meeting the needs of the population. And then we also decided to focus on early elementary students as well in this research project. So here are the National Agricultural Learning Outcomes in those 2 categories. So on the left side, there's the agriculture and the environment NALOs. And so the topics of these NALOs vary from ecosystems to natural resources and conservation methods. While on the other hand, the STEM dimensions of agriculture NALOs on the right side, these focus more about technology, inherited traits, and also tools that farmers are using to make their work more efficient. So why are the NALOs important? Well, the NALOs are one way that we can measure students' agricultural literacy to kind of gauge what topics and what issues students know about agriculture. So it's a way for us to kind of gauge what students know about agriculture and how vast their understanding is. One of the really cool things about the NALOs is they're aligned with the next generation science standards. And so this makes it really easy for teachers when they're teaching a science concept to relate this to agriculture and to kind of tie in that relationship between science and agriculture. And curriculum development is another product associated with the NALOs. Jenny and I worked on a curriculum development project in which we were working with researchers and experts to create lesson plans that were directly aligned with these NALOs. And so those lesson plans really focus on that alignment with the next generation science standards. So we're talking about ag and science, and trying to make these lesson plans as good as they can be. So in order to look at these NALOs, we wanted to create an assessment test as a way to measure if students are knowledgeable about those topic areas or not. And this is a big portion of my master's thesis project. So I conducted a sequential exploratory mixed methods project.
What is that?
Yeah, that's a very big word. And what that really means is this research project involves both qualitative and quantitative pieces, with the qualitative pieces leading into the quantitative. So what we did is I interviewed 35 students in grades 3 through 5, and the interviews were about 15 minutes, and it just kind of were pretty broad agricultural topics, just seeing what students knew about agriculture, and more importantly, seeing what vocabulary students were using when talking about agriculture. So after conducting these interviews, I coded and analyzed those transcriptions and used that data to create an assessment test. And we really wanted that assessment test to be based off those interviews that occurred, and then centered around those NALOs as well. And so 400 students across the state completed that assessment test. And so the combination of those interviews and the results we got from the assessment test gives us a big picture of student understanding of agriculture in our state. So we know, what terms they're familiar with, and then what terms and topics they might not be as familiar with. So I'm going to talk through one example of those NALOs that we worked with. And this is one of the Ag and the Environment NALOs for students in grades 3 through 5. So this NALO reads, explain how the interaction of the sun, soil, water, and weather and plant and animal growth impacts agricultural production. So we're interested to see if students recognize what plants and animals need to survive. And on the next slide, we have an example of an interview conversation with a student. So the first thing I asked the students was, if I was to raise a corn plant, or if I was to raise a goat, what would I need, and what would these living things need to survive? So as you can see, the first thing I asked them was how would they raise corn, and what would corn need to grow? And the student, first off, just says it would need water, sun, and good soil. And then I was really interested with why do they need that? Can they give me an explanation for why we need those resources? So I started probing the student and asked, why would it need soil? And so then the student is able to tell me that it gives the nutrients it needs to grow. And then, I'm asking more questions. What else might it do so the plant can be growing strong? So I'm really trying to dig into why a plant would need soil to survive. And as this, you can see, the student does give a great response to why this plant would need those resources to survive. And then on the flip side of this, we also asked them about a goat, and if they could recognize, that it would need food, water, space, stuff like that. And so we were really just trying to dig in to see how much they knew and the reasons why plants and animals need those living things to survive. So with all 35 of those interviews, we coded those and broke it down and categorized each one as low, medium, or high understanding. So low understanding, we're just basically looking if the student can recognize those natural resources, so they could tell me the sun, soil, and water is needed for plant growth. So basically we were just looking for a list, and if they couldn't explain it, that was fine for that category. When we're moving into that medium understanding category, we wanted them to be able to explain why those living things need those resources. So when I asked that student about why would the plant need soil, they could talk about nutrients and holding it in the ground. And then finally, in the high understanding category, these students were able to identify needs of plants and animals and explain why they were needed. And in addition, we started noticing students were using complex vocabulary. So maybe students, when they were talking about sunlight, they can mention photosynthesis. And so they were using terms that were a higher level, and we could see that knowledge growing as they progressed.
Right. So if you think about the student that we just showed the interview from, where would they fall on the student understanding levels?
You know, this student would be kind of right in between that medium and that high understanding category, because that student was able to list off those resources and provide an example of why they were needed. But we didn't see any, you know, complex terms in that interview, so we'd probably keep them in that medium understanding category.
Okay. I see Andrea has a question about the questions. Were they the same for all 35 students, or did it change kind of depending on how the students responded?
All of the questions for the most part were the same. We focused on 9 different NALOs, 5 in the ag and the environment and 4 in the STEM. And for each one of those NALOs, there was probably about 2 questions we made sure we asked every student. And then it just kind of varied depending on what they were saying, just with our little follow-up questions we would have. So for the most part, it was all the same, but then just additional questions might have been different.
All right, so another question about how similar were the interview questions to the survey that you then developed for the 400 students?
It was very similar, and we're actually going to see slides with questions on it. I think it's the next slide.
Okay,
yeah.
here we go.
Okay, so this is an example of the questions for the specific NALO. So as you remember on the previous slide, we had student knowledge categorized as low, medium, and high. And so low understanding, we were basically just wanting students to recognize the resources plants and animals need. So in this question, we're simply asking students whether does not have an effect on animals. It's a true-false question, so we're basically just seeing if they can recognize the impact that factors have on plants and animals. And then moving into that medium understanding question, we're asking students how plants use soil. And so this is a question that we directly asked in the interviews, and we're just kind of getting at knowing the reason behind why plants and animals need those resources. And then finally, that high understanding category question involves the word photosynthesis. So we're talking about how sunlight makes photosynthesis possible, and we're asking students where this process occurs in a plant. So we're including a term in this question to really, you know, separate the difference between, you know, that medium and the high understanding in that question. So to answer your question, the interview questions and the assessment questions were very closely related to each other.
Yep, we missed one. There you go.
Okay, and so we were really interested in how knowledge varied across grades. So, you know, thinking, what does a 3rd grader know, or what does a 5th grader know that a 3rd grader might not? And so this NALO about the sun and the soil and how that impacts plants and animal growth, we found the mean scores from all the assessments. So how much of a percent of 3rd graders got the low understanding question correct. And as you can see on this chart, for the low understanding questions, students in grades 3, 4, and 5, basically we didn't really see a whole lot of difference. You know, most of them knew the answer to that question about how weather impacts animal or plant growth. And then that medium understanding question, if you remember, we talked about why do plants need soil. And so you can kind of see an upward trend from 56% of 3rd graders got this question correct, while 72% of 5th graders got this question correct. And then the high understanding questions, they were designed to you know, separate the differences. So thinking back to that high understanding question, we had the word photosynthesis, and we were asking students where that occurs in a plant. And you can tell the difference in knowledge based on grades right here. It's shaded in blue. And 17% of third graders were able to answer this question correctly, while 30% of fourth graders and 45% of fifth graders answered this question correctly. So these questions on the assessment were really designed to get at that low, medium, and high understanding knowledge levels. And then we were just kind of seeing, you know, how does that vary based on the students' grades.
Mm-hmm.
And so one part of the interviews actually included all of the agriculture and the environment questions and the scientific dimensions of agriculture questions in the interviews. And then before we gave out the assessment, we actually split it up because it would have been nearly 30 questions long, and we didn't want to you know, take too much time from these students. So we separated it into either 15 or 20 question assessments. And so about roughly 200 students took either one, for a total of 400 students taking it. And we have the assessments in Qualtrics right here. And we'll just kind of walk you through it, but we asked students their gender. I don't know if they can see that on the screen.
Hold up. Let me pull up the right screen. There you go.
Okay, so this is the agriculture and the environment assessment. And we asked students for their gender and their grade level, and that was the only demographics we collected in this study. And as we scroll through it, it's scrambled based on all of those 5 NALOs and, you know, low, medium, and high understanding questions. So you can see we have a few true, false, multiple choice. I think there's some matching questions in here. And we're just basically asking students questions directly from those NALOs.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you have any pictures or graphs. Yep, we have some pictures.
At the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the important things to remember with this assessment tool is that it's not based on any certain curricular intervention, right? It's really focused on the NALOs themselves and not necessarily what the students have experienced. So it's a little bit more broad-reaching than something that was, say, developed specifically for a certain activity to measure outcomes. So along with these assessment tools, we have these available on Qualtrics. So we've given you the links to the Qualtrics surveys themselves. However, if you do that, all of the data will just come directly to us, and it'll be difficult for you to get that. And so we are happy to share any of these tools with you. So if you'd like to send us an email, we can share them that way. Otherwise, you're welcome to just copy questions off of here and use them that way, whatever makes sense for your particular situation. So we'll go back to the PowerPoint here. So again, I'm Jenny Kashwai. My email address is there. Also, Corey Forbes would be happy to help you make a connection with these different survey instruments. So we're always willing to share these materials. So with that, I will ask for any concluding questions.
Hey guys, this is Deborah. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Awesome. So just one thing I wanted to mention here is that you're right in that the NALOs are not built on any kind of criterion referenced curriculum by design. And so it was interesting to see the progression because they're grouped in by the end of grade 5, you know, by the end of grade 2. Looked like most things progressed that way. They got better at them at the older levels. Not in all cases, as I looked at one quick. And I've read the entire thesis, so that was pretty obvious they're going. But that all said, the good thing about them being, I don't want to say nebulous, but actually a little bit more generic, is that they were based on they were linked to the national standards of what students would have accomplished or be expected to know by the end of grade level based on the national standards.
Exactly.
So I think the good thing about this is that regardless of the curriculum, these are things that students would know by the end based on the national standards anyway, and then we've just compiled them linked with agriculture. So I would hope that regardless of state, then these would be useful.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
So you have 15 questions on the environment.
And 12 questions on the STEM.
Okay. And that's in total, right?
Yep. Yeah, so for each NALO, there's the low, medium, and high understanding questions.
Okay. All right. And then I see, that those URLs under there, what are those links to?
Those link to our Qualtrics surveys. And so
are they shared publicly? I guess can I click on them?
you can click on them. Yep, go ahead. You can click. You can take the assessment. So the only thing.
It's not allowing me to do that, probably because it's on your screen, but.
Okay.
I could maybe type it. I just want to make sure they're shared publicly so people could get to them, but.
Yes.
I could probably go to another browser and type it in and see what happens.
Yeah, I did the link shortening, so they're a little bit more palatable to type in.
Yeah, Qualtrics ones can be.
They're huge, yeah.
That was just my only comment, guys, is that, while they were by design, I think that's a good thing so that states can use.
Definitely, yeah. That's how we're trying to sell the idea too.
So I would just like to ask, I know that in the discussion on your thesis, you made a recommendation about some changes or improvements you could see to the NALOs. Do you want to just mention those?
Yeah, because especially in the interviews, we saw a lot of the vocabulary and terms that were included in the NALOs were difficult for students to understand. I know the concept of ecosystems and agro-ecosystems was really hard for students when we asked the first couple of students about those terms. So we kind of, went down and just asked them about landscapes and then tried to, talk about what kind of animals and plants might you see in fields in Nebraska. And, trying to start ground level and really see what they knew. And then I know inherited traits was another one that students really struggled with. And then so we basically kind of started talking about does everyone in your class look the same? And, to get them talking about, why there's differences in people and, how there's differences in animals and crops as well. And those were probably the big topics that students really struggled with. But I think just probing in those interviews really helped us understand what the student knew. Because, if we asked them those first few questions, we didn't really get maybe the answer we wanted. So we just probed them a little bit more to, really understand what they knew about agriculture.
So then my question is, would it be good to, for example, I was able to get to, the Qualtrics survey, not the actual, I can see what it looks like on the front end, so to speak, not the back end.
Yeah.
It would actually be good to share the back end out so people could maybe manipulate these.
That was our plan. So.
Okay. But I wonder if it would be good then if you know what you did. And so I'm looking at one question here. It says, which of the following is an agriculture system or ecosystem? I'm wondering if what you kind of a hint or a definition for the terms. One of the things for curriculum for us, I know Andrea's on here, is that when we develop curriculum for these grade levels, we are adding in the matrix vocabulary. And so we need to make sure that the vocabulary that's in the NALOs is the vocabulary that's in the lessons. See, that will help a lot. But I wonder if on some of these where based on your experience, that they had some trouble, if you could edit these so that, definition or glossary at the end, or just a little, this means this, that's helpful to both teachers and students. I think that would be user-friendly because you already know it's a problem.
Yeah.
Right. And you did that with the drought, right? You talked about not enough rain. So in case a student didn't know what the word drought meant, they could still potentially answer the question based on the understanding.
Yeah, I see that. Flood, landscape. So if there's anything else in here as you're kind of finalizing this, that that's related to the NALOs, that we have a vocabulary issue with, and it was primarily NALOs are designed for teachers.
Right.
So the questions have to be developed for the students based on what we're getting at. So if you can take one more look and that there's, because I read, I wanted to read limitations, I wanted to know what needed to be improved. I mean, This is an ongoing process.
Mm-hmm.
But if you know those right off and you haven't caught them all, would you just double check, and that will, I think, help peeps.
Definitely.
Okay. And your plan is to share out the back end of Qualtrics? You know how to do that?
No, that's what we wanted to do that for today, but we started playing with it like, oh, this isn't as easy as we thought. And so I threw our addresses up there. So if people want to email us, I know I can export the Qualtrics directly to an email, but I couldn't figure out in time how to do it just kind of more broadly.
So I did a test with Lisa Gascala in Florida, and she, I made her I had to make her a collaborator.
Right, yeah.
So I think at the end of the surveys, you say if you want that kind of access to email somebody, and that might be the only real way to do it.
Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of. So, I mean, our email addresses are on here. So if people want to email us, we're happy to share. I mean, that's not a problem. So.
Yeah, do make me a collaborator on those if you would. I would love to.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Well, there's a lot more in the study, but those are some things I think that are really useful, the tool. And then you might want to put a link to the full thesis here. I have it on the Ag Literacy wiki, but
okay. Yeah, we can do that.
They might want to look at your methodology and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So is anybody else on the webinar have any questions? You have the chat box up if you're more comfortable typing a question.
I know who these two are right here. This one's Denise right here.
All right. Well, you know where to find us. So if you want to ask us any questions later, we're, of course, happy to respond. So thank you for joining us today. Thanks for listening to Molly share a lot of her work. I know she's been working on this really hard for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
So sad to see her go. But
Molly, did you submit this as a poster for a research meeting or anything?
I've submitted it to the Journal of Agriculture Education. I actually just submitted it last week. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so hopefully that gets accepted. And
you presented part of this at NARS last year.
Yeah, yeah, I presented at NARS, and that was just kind of more of the methodology of, the process of designing those assessment questions.
Okay. Well, I'm presenting the NALOs in a research poster session, and this is kind of good documentation for those. So I will share out that that's been done, that it's not published yet, but that it's still, you can get on ProQuest.
True. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.